I'm Stephanie Stewart from Falling Into First, and I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit more about staying organized this back to school season. I know firsthand that organization is one of those things that can be really personal to a teacher and an individual. What works for you might not work for somebody else, but my hope here today is you'll be able to walk away with a couple of great new ideas that you can implement this back to school season to make your life just a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first one I have is a Dropbox. And so if you're not familiar, a Dropbox is just a place where your students can turn in anything that they're bringing to you in the morning. For example, if they have lunch money they have to turn in, or maybe it's a Scholastic book order or a field trip permission slip form, something that they're wanting to pass off to you in the morning. You don't want them all handing them to you while you're trying to take attendance, greet students, get ready in the morning, and possibly misplace things or have them get lost. And so I just have my students turn anything like that into the Dropbox that sits on my teacher table, and they know the routine, and that way I have a chance to go through it later on in the day when they are at specials or when I'm on my plan time, and I know that I'm going to have a chance to make sure everything gets put in the right spot. The next one is new student bags. So these are so helpful when a new student comes into your classroom unexpectedly at some point during the year. I love having new students join our class, but oftentimes I don't get a lot of notice that they're coming. A lot of times it's just the secretary walking the new student down first thing that morning. And so it's really helpful to have these bags pre-made, ready to go before the school year begins. And I just make sure that I include anything that my new class would be taking home the first week of school. So we have things like our class schedule, our rules and expectations, the district technology release form. I also love to include a survey for families to tell me more about the student in my classroom from their perspective. I always find those really helpful at the start of the school year, getting to know my students. I have a laminated birthday certificate in there, so that way I can quickly write the student's name on and add it to my file for those, so that when their birthday comes, I can pull it out and we're ready to go. The little brochure that I hand my students, my families, about our classroom life. And so these are just super nifty to have on hand before the year begins. You just have to prepare, 5 to 6, maybe a couple more, depending on how many students you're used to getting join your class every year. And that way you're not scrambling the day of trying to find all of these pieces to make sure that they go home with your new student. Next, I have my student supplies. So for me, almost every classroom I've been in the past 11 years has had tables for my students to work at, which is fine with me. I actually prefer my students to be at tables over desks because I just find it more collaborative and we have a lot more freedom to move around the room. If you like doing flexible seating, or even just having the option for students to have a flexible learning space at some point during the day, even if you don't do it all day long, having a spot for students to take their supplies with them is really important, and how they're gonna corral those supplies becomes important. And so 2 things I really like to do in my classroom is, 1, I give my students a pencil box that has their name on it. So it's our pencil box name tags. It has a lot of quick reference tools on them, like a number line, their alphabet, colors, a hundreds chart over here. And so that way, when they're traveling around the room throughout the day, they can take their supplies with them if we're gonna move seats. And I have them have their crayons and their scissors and just a couple of other individual student supplies that they take with them in their pencil boxes. And these have been super helpful, especially in recent years when we did flexible seating. And the other piece to this is where they're going to keep their binders, their notebooks, their folders. And so I like to give them a small bin that will hold their pencil box, but also hold those other items. And so I just found these ones at Target just last week. They come in a variety of colors, and what I like is that they're a lot bigger than a lot of these bins that I've seen there in the past. So these are like right in that like bullseye dollar spot section. And so this one easily fits a binder, a folder. It would fit a couple of notebooks in here. Their pencil box fits in it as well. And so essentially in my classroom, this becomes like their portable cubby, as you see there. And so they're able to take it with them around the room as they're working. At the end of the day, when we clean up, they store all their items in here, and they can either put it on their table or desk spot, or if you have a shelf or another designated area in your classroom, it's really handy to have them store all of their supplies. And then for shared supplies, things like pencils, glue sticks, or anything that I don't need my students to have be individual in their box at all times. You can kind of see in that first picture, just the pencil caddies that I leave out on our tables. Next, I have a book hospital. A book hospital is super helpful for when students are finding those books that have a cover missing, maybe some pages are torn inside. It just needs a little extra TLC, or maybe it's time to retire it from your classroom library. But rather than have them constantly come up to tell you that they found these issues with the book, interrupting your lesson, interrupting your small groups, I tell my students to just turn it into the book hospital, and I will take care of the book as soon as I have the opportunity to do so. And this particular bin lives in our classroom library, so it's really handy and available to my students. Next, I'm going to share with you my key, I call these my must-have to avoid the paper track bins. I've used them for years, and I will never not have a classroom that has these bins. So the first one is my things to file bin, and so in here is where I put anything that I know needs to get put away in a certain spot, but you know what it's like in the classroom. People are coming in and out, you're going to meetings, you're coming back, you're picking up your students. So if I don't have a chance to deal with it in the moment, I go ahead and put it in my things to file bin, so that way when I do have time after school on plan, when I don't have students or other people in my room, I can go through and make sure, again, everything gets put in the correct spot. So it's like a temporary holding spot for important papers and things that I get. Papers to grade is self-explanatory. Anytime I have papers that need grading, I go ahead and stick them in there with a paper clip and take them home. I don't like to take them home, but sometimes we do. Take them out during plan, and whenever I have a chance to grade, when I'm done, I go ahead and send them home. Needs to copy, that's where I put anything during the week that I'm going to be needing to make copies of for the following week. So as I'm doing my planning, as I'm finding things that I need, I go ahead and throw them in my need to copy bin. And then when it's time for me to go to the copy machine, I like to do my copies in bulk whenever I can. I just grab the bin, take it down with me, and I'm good to go. Extra papers, probably my favorite bin in this whole bunch. This is where I tell my students to put any extra papers that are handed out to the entire class. So for example, if I'm handing out a Scholastic book order, if I'm handing out a field trip permission form, if I'm handing out some important document that needs to get home to my students, it's inevitable that someone's going to be absent, someone's going to lose the paper and need another copy. And so when they come to you and they need an additional copy, we go look in the extra paper bin. So after I'm done handing out papers, or if I have a student helper handing out papers, we put any extras that we have in that bin, and then that way I can easily go in there and find what I need to hand that extra copy to the student that's missing the paper. And basically the way I run it is once it's filled to the top, I go ahead and recycle all the pages underneath it, and then we start over again. So really easy to maintain, and I can't tell you how much time that saves me every single year. You see the book hospital there, and then last I have a bin for absent work. So if students are out for the day, any papers that were supposed to go home or any work that they need to complete, I go ahead, clip them together, throw it in the bin, and then whenever they come back, whether it's the next day or a few days, depending on how long they're out, I know where to find everything that I want to make sure gets home with them the next day. So those are my favorite must-have bins. This next one is a twofer because I use these labels for two different things. One, I like to use them for my unit plans. Now, everyone has their own preferences. My first year in the classroom, I made myself beautiful binders to hold all of my units. They were so well organized, they looked beautiful. But it was not the most effective system for me personally. And if they work for you, that's amazing, and keep doing what works for you. That's the key here. But if you find that maybe you want a different system, the reason I like putting my units in bins, for example, our science and social studies units in particular that I'm going to do each month, is because I like to also include the read-alouds that are going to go along with that unit. I like to include any craft samples or projects, anything that I'm going to show students from year to year, rather than recreate it every year. If I can keep a sample in the bin and have room for it, any little artifacts or things that I might be able to pull out and store in there as well as all the copies and lesson plans for what we're going to do. And that way, if I just toss things back in the tub as the unit goes on, at the end of the unit, I can go back and quickly organize my tub, make sure it's set and ready to go for the following year. And then also, I like to have teacher read-alouds separated from my classroom library. Now, these are the books that I know I'm going to read every year on that month. For example, February, if I have 4 or 5 books that I know I'm going to do a read aloud with my class with, or that go along with our ELA unit that month, and I want to make that cross-curricular connection, rather than keep them in my classroom library and have to dig through and find them, I keep them separate in my cabinet. And so you can store your books as bins. I use them now with my son at home for his board books as well. Or you also can take these labels, and I like to put them either on like a popsicle stick, or you can get a paint stirring stick for free from the paint store and just tape these onto it. And then when you put your books onto your shelf, you can just stick these in like that, and that way you're organized. You have all your December books, all your January, your February, your March, etc. It's just really easy to grab what you need at a glance. Next is my lesson plans. Now, I'm old school. I still prefer to do paper pencil lesson plans for myself. I know that everyone has their preference, and also you might have different requirements at your principal, your school, your district. I know it looks different across the board, what you might have to turn in or not have to turn in, but these are just for me. So I like to have every week. On the left, I want to see my week at a glance. I want to see what unit we're on, what lesson we're on, if we have any assessments coming up, any quick notes I need to remember. I keep that kind of on that calendar spreadsheet. And then on the right is where I break it down by subject. So for each subject, I'm going to label the subject at the top. And then for each day, I just really quickly jot down what standard our lesson is hitting that day, what our objective is, and any notes or an overview for that lesson. Again, just for me, so that I have all of my ideas and plans together when I'm planning for a week. And then equally important is just making sure that I am constantly coming back and evaluating what needs to be done each day, things I don't want to forget. One of the biggest lies I tell myself as an adult is, oh, I don't need to write that down. But yes, I absolutely do. And so at school, I like to use a quick peek at the week. I print it out every week, keep it on my little clip folio or with my lesson plans, and I just jot down the 3 most important things I have to do every day. Sometimes at the start of the week, I don't have something for every single day, but as the week goes on, I'll come back to it and fill things out. Any little notes or things I want to remember for myself at school or at home. And it's just a nice, quick, easy way to organize my to-dos for each week, and I just print out a new one every week. Conferences. So conferences, you have a couple of weeks before your first conference, typically in the fall. However, they always sneak up on me really fast. And so this is just a quick overview of how I like to do conferences with my students. Every kid's going to have a manila folder that I share with their parents, and this is all of the stuff that I like to include in that folder during the conference. District assessments, any information about grading. I like to have a sample of their most recent writing in there so that we can go over where they're at developmentally in their writing. I like to have anything from another specialist or another teacher that might work with that student that they've given me to share with the families will go in there as well. And then a list of ways that they can support their student at home. But before the conferences, I like to send home this conference survey. And this is actually a freebie in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So if you go to my store and search for conferences, this document and a couple others will come up to help you organize for conferences. But the reason I like to do this is because it just helps me be better prepared for that conference, especially considering we're usually on a time crunch. We only get so much time to meet with each family. And so this way, if they have any concerns coming in, something I know they want to talk to me about, they're able to communicate that meet, and it just helps me be better prepared to meet with them and to discuss at that conference. Okay, my last one is the tub for the sub. So I've been doing this since my early years in the classroom, and it's one of my tried and trues I come back to again and again. It's really simple. You just go ahead and throw everything that your sub needs for the day into your sub tub, and you can house it there, throughout the year and add to it when you know you're going to be out. I know at my school we were also required to have emergency sub plans in case for some reason you couldn't come in at the last minute. Maybe your kiddo got sick or there's an emergency, and so people knew that they would just find my sub tub, pull it out, and that's where they could find my emergency plans. But I go ahead and here's where I put Band-Aids. I put the read aloud for the day. I put any passes or things that are critical that students are going to need to pass out, as well as the copies that they need and the plans for the day. And just an easy, simple way. This is a freebie on my blog as well. I talk about it in there a little bit more detail what I like to include. So if you go to my blog and search Tub for the Sub, this freebie will come up for you. I also like to include chocolate because gosh knows they deserve it. So love the sub tub. So those are my top 10 tips and tricks for you. I hope you found a couple of ideas that you may be able to take with you and implement in your classroom this year. I went ahead and put together a file with some of the things I mentioned today so that you can hopefully download them and be able to implement them a little easier in your classroom with your students this year. And I just want to say, I hope you have an amazing start to the school year. I love talking with teachers, so if you have any questions about something we talked about today, or you just like to chat back to school, you can go ahead and shoot me an email. My email is fallingintofirst@gmail.com, and you can find me on social particularly Instagram, at fallingintofirst. So thanks so much.